Hello, Internet, and welcome back to another edition of Meet La Prensa. Tonight's guest is Edwin Pitti, national correspondent for Univision, who won a 2019 Emmy for a report on Afrolatinos. Blackness is not a monolith. Afrolatinos on YouTube talk about feeling too black to be Latino and too Latino to be black. Edwin, you reported that many Afrolatinos experience the double racism of being black and of being Latino. That was 3 years ago. Has the rise of Afro-Latina pop culture icons like Cardi B who had any effect on the Afro-Latino experience, both in the Americas and maybe around the world?
Yeah, I would say yes, Pablo, but I would like to elaborate a little bit on that because even though Cardi B is somebody with thousands and millions of followers, for example, she was featured during election time with Biden, even with Sanders, they use her to talk to a lot of people about the importance of voting because they know that she has a lot of followers. But at the end of the day, when you look at the Afro-Latino community, especially Black women, not all of them identify themselves with somebody like Cardi B. I'm not saying that what she does is bad, but again, like you have a lot of Afro-Latino Afro-feminists who do not believe or do not like exactly what she does. Because again, at the end of the day, Cardi B is a performer. She's not really an activist. And maybe she doesn't know all the struggle that Afro-Latinos are going through, not only in Latin America, but here in the US. So has she done something positive for the community? Absolutely. But I don't believe she covers the whole important the whole importance of knowing exactly the struggles behind the Black and the Afro-Latino community here in the US.
What are the biggest challenges for Afro-Latinos in the news business?
Well, that's a tough question. For example, I don't think Afro-Latinos have an issue when it comes to finding jobs in the English market because in the last couple of years they have been doing a little bit better when it comes to becoming more inclusive in the newsroom. We see a lot of more Black journalists faces on the screen. Now the Kamala Harris is in the White House. We even see more Black women on journalists on the screen. But the real issue, I have to say, Pablo, comes in the Hispanic newsrooms because believe it or not, there's still the mentality that if you're white, if you have blue eyes, if you are blonde, if you look like the one in la telenovela, like you are the one who belongs on TV. So that is something the companies are working on little by little. I have to say that during February on Black History Month, for example, us in Univision, we had many e-talks. That's how we call it. We had conversations with activists, with Black journalists, and we were opening to their suggestion as to what we need to improve on. What else do we need to do to become more inclusive? Because like you said in the beginning, the racism is not only between Black and white, it's also between Blacks, and it's even worse when it comes between Latinos. You have a lot of people from the Dominican Republic that do not like being called Puerto Rican, or you have a lot of Colombians who do not like to be called Panamanian, and it's a long story. So it all comes down to unlearning a lot of things that we have in our head and learning to be more inclusive at the end of the day. That's very important.
So what would somebody who wants to kind of get it right, if you will, and engage the discussion, and like if you have an editorial decision to make about, say, about identity and the terminologies that are used around identity, is there any resources out there that is supported by the Afro-Latino community as sort of authoritative?
Well, you have to find the organizations within the community. It comes down to not making editorial decisions if you don't know the story, or working out on packages just to get it over with, or covering. For example, we received a lot of criticism when it came to the whole George Floyd story because a lot of newsrooms, especially at the local level, they didn't know they didn't know the struggle. They didn't know all the issues within the Black community in the U.S. And they kind of were just reporting the fact that a guy was killed by the police, and that was it. Another Black American killed by the police, but they don't understand the history behind it. So when it comes to social issues such as all the struggles within the Black community and the Afro-Latino community, you have to educate yourself before you cover them. And we know that, when it comes to news, it's a very fast-paced environment, but you have to take the time to talk to the right people. When it comes, in these times, it's not about just putting things on the screen to be the first one, to get that exclusive, to filled your mouth saying that you were the first one on the scene covering the story. That doesn't cut it anymore, Pablo. You have to do your homework. You have to report the truth. But to report the truth, you have to know the history behind of all the things that could be happening.
Well, have there been times when being an Afro-Latino in covering a story where it's been an obstacle, or have there been times where it's been, say, an advantage? I thought that the guests or the interviewees that you had on your Emmy award-winning piece about Afro-Latinos it was a sort of a spectrum of people with a lot of perspectives, a lot of accents within their Spanish. So I wonder, like, how that affects, what would be that effect of sort of looking outwardly as a reporter from this experience? How does it factor in?
Well, I have to say that personally, it has never affected me negatively because, again, even though I consider myself to be Afro-Latino because my mom is Black, and I mean, all my family from my mom's side are Black. That's why I consider myself Afro-Latino. But if you see me in the street, clearly I'm not Black. So when it comes to asking questions, so when it comes to having access to cover certain stories, or when it comes to dealing with racist people to give them a name, I haven't had any issues. But it has been an advantage to me when it comes to covering. For example, every time I cover anything that has to do with Black Lives Matter or any social racial issue, because I know the story and because I have taken the time to listen to the people that really have struggles with the color of their skin. It's very unfortunate to say it like that, but it's a reality that we are living through in the United States. So the fact that I have taken the time to listen has allowed me to cover in a better way those stories and to have it and to gain access to more communities and to more groups that at times they don't want to talk to journalists because they feel their stories are not being covered fairly. So for them, the most powerful tool is social media. That's when you can find them all the time. But nowadays it's very hard, especially for Hispanic networks that you can count them with one hand in the US. For them to have access to all of these groups, it can be complicated because we don't have the best reputation covering those stories because of the way news has been covered lately. But little by little, I think more journalists are doing their job and gaining that confidence within the Afro-Latino community.
So, Edwin, why journalism? What made you take the plunge?
Well, when I was little, I always liked everything that had to do with poesía, oratoria, and all of that. But then when I came to the US back in 2006, my first job was bagging groceries in Fort Bragg. It's a military base in North Carolina. And I couldn't speak any English back then. I had just finished high school back in my hometown, Panama. And then the only way for me to be informed wasn't even Hispanic TV because I was working the whole day. So I was just reading the little Hispanic newspaper in Fayetteville. It was called El Acento Latino. And, right there, I was able to understand the importance of having access to information in your own language. And little by little, I started dreaming about it. Because in Panama, I've always wanted to work on TV, but it was a dream that it went away because I couldn't pronounce the letter R when I was little. I used to say R. So I was like, oh, nobody will ever hire me if I cannot even pronounce la letra R. But then I was able to learn how to pronounce it. I overcame that. And then here in the US, little by little, I started visiting the small Univision station in North Carolina, where I became an associate producer. Then I became a reporter, then an anchor. And after 6 years, I was already the anchor and the executive producer. It was a team of 5 people who put together the first Hispanic newscast in North Carolina. Then after that, I went to Philly. Then I came to Washington, D.C.
Wow. So here in Washington, obviously there are a ton of reporters of every shape and size from all over the world. Who would you say are the most underrated news workers in American newsrooms today?
Wow, that's a tough question. that's a very tough question. Without mentioning any names, I would say that I have a lot of respect for the reporters at Voice of America. I think they're doing great work, and it seems that they're not really being seen here in the U.S. Like I know they focus more on countries in Latin America and all over the world, but I think a lot of people are not very aware. And if you allow me to take it even to my home country, Panama, there is this account called Praxis Pty. It's a group of young journalists doing great work, Pablo. I mean, great work. These guys are working 24/7, really masticando la noticia. You know, they're like breaking it down to the teeth for people to understand what's happening not only in Panama but around the world. So are people that have a lot of talent. I don't feel that necessarily they have the platform they would like to have right now, but I have no doubts that they will make it, that they will get there.
Is there anything else you want to talk to us today before we call it for another episode of Meet La Prensa?
Well, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. You know, I met you since day one when I came to DC, and I have a lot of respect for you. You're a great friend. But
Thank you, Edwin. Likewise.
What I would like to tell the newsrooms in the U.S., especially Hispanic newsrooms, to be more inclusive, to hire more Afro-Latinos. You know, not and again to understand that not all Afro-Latinos are necessarily black. It comes to like knowing the history, and it's just not to sit down and say like, oh, I have a diverse news team. It's just not about saying it. It's about understanding what that means and to cover the stories correctly. Because I have to say, even though I was able to win that Emmy, keeping it real with you, Pablo, it was a struggle to get that story approved. In the beginning, the news director didn't want it to go with that story because she didn't believe that that was a story that was going to get us a lot of views here in the DMV because, the main audience is from El Salvador. So she didn't think that was going to be a good idea to put it on air. So it was something that I had to fight for a couple of weeks before it went on air. And because I fought for it and we got that Emmy, it was a good feeling, not just because of the award, but because of all the comments that we received and that we continue to receive after 3 years on the importance. And that story, again, to wrap it up, is very basic. There is so much that we still have to learn. But I think that's like a good segue, if you don't know anything about it, to take a look at that report and then just go and keep learning. That's what you can do. The best you can do. Keep learning.
The question that for you would be the stop off point if you were going to write part two or report on part two of Afro-Latinos today?
I would go to the food, believe it or not, because I'm a foodie. I love to eat and I love to cook. And a lot of times, a lot of people talk about, I like Italian food, I like Middle Eastern food, I like Hispanic food, but people do not realize all the influence that African food has on all of the food around the world. It's amazing. Like it's a whole new world. And that is something that I wanted to cover when I was working on Afrolatinos. But one of my producers for that story was a friend of mine in Panama who is Afro-Latina and Afro-feminist. And she was telling me, like, Edwin, like, just keep it simple because this is a topic that you could talk to for so many days and you will never end because there is so much history. But leave the food out because that's a whole another game that you could really develop and wow people. So again, because I moved from the local division to national, so now it's a little bit more complicated with as far as freedom to cover stories and whatnot. But that is something that eventually I will take upon to put it on social media and to educate people on that too.
Amazing. Edwin Pitti, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Meet La Prensa. We hope you'll come back and see us soon. And if you are watching this and you like the video, subscribe to us on YouTube and drop a comment to say who you would like to see next on Meet La Prensa.